The game was over. The roaring stadium was now silent, empty of fans, a forlorn place of crushed popcorn boxes, drink cups, and trampled programs. The coach entered a sullen, utterly quiet locker room, helmets down on the floor, jerseys pulled off and thrown into a pile in the corner. "I just want you guys to know I'm real proud of the way you played this afternoon," he said, "real proud. We didn't win, but we did prove to a lot of people what we could do. It was a moral victory." On the way out, with the autumn sky now dark, the second-string tackle said to the quarterback, "What's a moral victory?" And the quarterback said, "It's what a coach tells you when you lose the game. It's what a coach says to a team when he knows he's done and it's his last season." If you can't fool a 17-year-old football player about failure, who can you fool? When the scores are read in the 6:30 sports, nobody ever talks about moral victory. They put the numbers up on the board. Winners, losers. Well, they'll tell you anything to get you back out there again the next week. Moral victory. The score didn't really show what happened. No, Vince Lombardi was right. Show me a guy who really believes all that stuff about failure not being failure, and I'll show you someone who's played too long without a helmet. A coach remains a coach only when the win-loss record is in his favor. Or the corporate president stands before a drooping sales graph and tries to explain to the shareholders, "Well, we lost $6 million this year, but we're calling it a moral victory. It was a year of character building for our company." A week later, there'll be a new name on the door of the CEO. Failure. It's that sinking emptiness in the stomach when you look down the posted list for grades on the exam and the anxious expectation that your name will not make the cut. It's that doctor returning from the operating room, surgical mask taken off to reveal a facial expression that says it all. You don't even have to ask, was the operation a success? You already know. It's packing up and moving from the house to separate apartments. Packing last the book of wedding pictures that won't be viewed again because they are too painful. Professor William Willimon sits on the Duke University Commencement Committee. As long as he can remember, they have never knowingly nominated anyone to speak to the graduates who was a failure. They look for people who are tops in their field, the achievers and doers, the shakers and movers. The graduates don't want to hear an address on reasons why my last 3 marriages ended in divorce, or the day they came to tell me to clean out my desk and turn in the key to the executive washroom. And yet the graduates know, just like that 17-year-old quarterback, that failure is built into life. Failure is a part of life. Maybe our business schools should teach a course on how to go bankrupt gracefully and honestly. Or the chemistry department should tell its PhDs what to do when you give 10 years of your life to find a cure for a new virus, only to have someone else get there 3 months before you. Or if the ministry school tells its graduates how to stay alive in a rundown inner-city church where the roof leaks and the membership declines. Because you know, don't you, that more of us spend our lives there than anywhere else, than roaring celebratory success That's how it was immediately after the crucifixion. Jesus had done great teaching, changed some hearts, healed some bodies and minds. Shouldn't that be enough? Moral victory. Don't you see? Go back to your everyday life now and be satisfied with what you got. No. Listen. Now on that same day, 2 of them were going to a village called Emmaus, and talking with each other about all the things that had happened, they stood still looking sad. I think those first followers were going through an experience with similarities to ours in everyday life, faced with the hard realities. So I put it to you in this fictional imaginary way. The road to Emmaus is a 7-mile-long journey, allowing a preacher like me a good deal of time to dwell with the hopelessness and helplessness that Christ's disciples then and often now know all too well. It's the week after Easter. What's known in the church and among my circle of colleagues as Low Sunday. There are fewer disciples here this week. We were over 600 here last week, counting kids, choirs, everything. We might break 400 today. Maybe. If Heather Mackey has a room full back there of kids. There are empty pews that were full last week. That's a reminder that many good people who have a partial hearing of the Easter story may spend much of the journey of their lives walking toward Emmaus without a complete clue about where they're going or what they ought to do now. Neither will they recognize the Holy One who has come alongside and actually accompanies them in this journey. Listen again. On that same day, 2 of them were going to a village called Emmaus. While they were talking and discussing, Jesus himself came near, but they did not recognize him. What were you discussing? He asked. They stood still, looking sad. And they replied, the things about Jesus of Nazareth. We had hoped that he was the one to redeem Israel. Though Luke, writing this gospel, spends only one sentence on the conversation between the disciples before this stranger joins them. That conversation they're having, alone out on the Emmaus Road, that's the kind of conversation that could last a lifetime. What do we do now? How do I make sense of this? What should we do when we've reached our wits' end? When what we once thought was worth our lives has left us washed up emotionally, financially, physically, spiritually, spent? And what are the conversations we have on the way to nowhere in particular, when the horizon of tomorrow stretches only as far as the petty place of tomorrow and another tomorrow and another tomorrow after that? I get the sense that you and I still live in a Good Friday world. Before the positive impact of the resurrection has completely and permanently hit home, sunk in. Imagine what Jesus' followers must have been experiencing and feeling on that Saturday and on the first parts of Sunday. After Jesus' execution, before his living, risen presence stunned them into the new reality. Imagine the disappointment, the fear, the despair, the confusion that gripped them. and looking at life ahead on that Saturday and early Sunday, looking at their lives, hopeless, grinding existence until eventually they too would die and be buried. I read these Easter stories and I get a sense of the panicked despair. Women running away in fear from the tomb. I didn't read you that this morning, but it's there in Mark's Gospel. Men thinking the women are crazy. Blabbering fools. Disciples too numb and too tired to absorb and accept early reports of stunning news. Listen again, and every time I'm adding a little bit more. On that same day, two of them were going to a village called Emmaus. Jesus himself came near. They did not recognize him. They stood still, looking sad. Some women of our group astounded us. They were at the tomb early this morning. They came back and told us they had indeed seen a vision of angels who said that he was alive. We are Easter people. We are to be Easter people. We ought not forget that. And we ought not let the Good Fridays of our world blind our vision. Like the first disciples on that Emmaus road journey, we need to journey with our eyes wide open. Vision clear. Seeing, knowing, sensing, feeling the risen Christ with us. And we heard some examples of that. If you remember, last week Tish came up here and shared her story. And it included the pain of divorce. And it included chemo and surgery for breast cancer. But listen to what she said. I decided that my faith didn't provide an easy life or all the answers. It led me to lean on Him, find comfort and joy in Him, and listen for His direction. And she ended this way. A Christ-centered life is awesome. I don't know where my journey will take me next, but I do know the joy and awe that an intentional faith brings is an amazing gift. That was Tish last week. I can't leave all our Lenten sharers without just scrolling through them and reminding you. Listen again to these modern disciples. They're us. And their recognition of Jesus on the journey with him. Jen, the first week, talked about how she grew up in the church, Sunday school, full meal deal, but then something changed. She's a full-time mom now, but she's learned what a personal friendship with Jesus, that's the way she put it. A personal friendship with Jesus on her journey. To me, that's experiencing him on the Emmaus Road. D, who's not in the front row today, he talked about his faith right up front. He said, long and winding road. Never mind Lennon McCartney. His spiritual journey is a long and winding road. But then he said it was on a trip to Mexico, building houses, that his eyes cleared, his vision saw other disciples and what it is to be connected to Jesus. Ruth, in her sparkling humor, talked about across years and miles from being a little 3-year-old and her first hearing about God to an electrifying spiritual experience as a teenager, and then the journey across decades and miles, Toronto, Florida, loss of loved ones. She lost a daughter to cancer. We did the funeral here. But Ruth talked about a church, this church, that she shares life's journey with, and the God who is present. And Hannah ended hers saying, I'm only 16 and I don't know everything, but I'm excited to see where God takes me and where I go in my future. See, Emmaus Road, she's got Jesus walking with her. And Jan, who went through a career working, deciding whether convicts could be released. Let me read you exactly what she said in hers. Now I see that God has always been right beside me, closer than I ever imagined. He was there through all of the positive and negative experiences and working through mentors and supporters. I even began to recognize God's presence in the lives of everyone within those prison walls. Emmaus Road. I think we need to expect and accept that we're going to have moments on the Emmaus Road. Afraid, confused, sad, discouraged, like those first two disciples. That's okay. It will sometimes be our reality. We live in a Good Friday world. And sometimes God's resurrection power is not immediately apparent. So life will have those challenging seasons. And that's part of the journey. And it's okay, as long as we also understand that even when we don't recognize him, Jesus is walking with us. And then there comes that moment when our vision clears and we see he's right here. And our hearts burn with joy within us. The risen Lord Jesus Christ be with us all, always. Amen.